everyone. To everyone that's attending, thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday evening. We're so happy to have you. For those of you probably know already what webinar this is, but if you don't, it's finance recruiting for non-MSB students. If you are an MSB student, we happily welcome you. I just know that sometimes for especially students who aren't in like a finance major or whatnot, there can be perhaps a little bit of a mental hurdle to overcome when it comes to, what are my chances, right? I'm not like in the school of business or a finance major. Will I be looked down upon? The short answer is no, absolutely not. And with me are three students who have successfully navigated this space, who are happy to answer your questions, provide you some idea of the resources they utilize, how their journey came to be. And I'm super, super excited and happy to welcome them today. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And so guys, why don't we start with your name, your the school and graduation year, your major, where you'll be going this upcoming summer / for post-grad full-time, and let's go with a fun fact, which is like always my to-go icebreaker. So someone start, whoever would like to.
I can go ahead and start. So hi everyone, my name is Alexa Heater. I am a senior in the SFS studying international economics and Spanish. I interned this past summer at Jefferies in fixed income sales and trading, and I'll be returning to Jefferies in the fall on fixed income as well on an emerging markets desk, mainly focusing on Latin America. And my fun fact is that I am the oldest of 6 kids.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
go ahead, Sylvie.
I can go next. So my name is Sylvie. I'm a senior in the college studying economics and sociology with a minor in business. So I summered at UBS in investment banking, and that's also where I will be going to after graduation. A fun fact about me, so growing up, I've actually lived in 6 different cities.
I guess it's my turn. Hey everyone, my name is Henry Dye, junior, currently in the SFS, studying international political economy. And this summer I will be joining Barclays in their sales and trading department as an intern. And fun fact, well, maybe I can go kind of the opposite of Sylvie. So I lived in the same city my whole life in Seattle. Not super fun, but I guess that's my fun fact. Excited.
Awesome, thanks everyone. And Seattle's a great city, Henry. So it's fantastic. And I lived in
not super exciting, but yeah.
But still, totally get it. Great, thanks everyone. So let's just hop right in. I was wondering if all of you could take turns sharing about what drew you into the field of finance, like what particularly stuck out to you as you were exploring this field, in comparison to like maybe other industries that you had been considering going into.
I can go ahead and start to keep in order, but so I didn't know that I wanted to go into finance until about sophomore year. I don't have anyone in my family in it, didn't really have friends in it. Most of my friends ended up being in the college and the SFS and were doing other things. And so I did decide to major in international economics and loved it. Like loved thinking of, especially macro, like macro is my thing. I absolutely loved all my macro classes, very into it. Loved the idea of figuring out how things connect in the world, kind of financially, politically, economically, all these things. And I know I want to go to law school in a couple years. And at the same time, I loved my economics degree and I did not want to start and just not have any experience actually in the workforce with anything related to that. So sophomore year, when the Career Center had their what is finance, what is investment banking, like what are any of these things, like, I might as well go. I'll see what they say, see what it's like. And I ended up talking to a lot of people who really, really loved the field and really loved kind of learning something new every day, having something fast paced, having something where you can focus on your area of interest. There's a lot of people who are like, hey, I love macro too. Like that's why I went into this. And that's how I found fixed income at the end of the day and things like that. So I started going to those events and really listening to people and figuring out why they were interested in it and figuring out like looking at those global connections, especially for people in the SFS. It's not only financially, like all political developments do impact financial markets and things like that as well. And that's probably also what landed me in more specific role after my summer as well. So thinking about like how you can connect your current interests and how that reflects in the financial world is also something that interests me, and that there was an opportunity to do that, an opportunity to specialize in something that I already knew I liked and bring in this new element that I wanted to kind of work on more. I had interned not anything in finance before. I had done work on campaigns. I'd worked at a couple federal agencies, worked with a startup company, but not really in like a finance role, things like that. But really wanted to get that kind of private sector exposure before going to law school, and then eventually probably going back into government, something like that. But I really wanted to get this experience because everyone I talked to had learned a lot, fast paced. Then you get into S&T versus investment banking, but kind of like I just said, I grew up in an environment of 5 younger siblings, like loud, everything going on, being next to a lot of people. That's something I wanted versus being alone in an office. So all those things, just really listening to people and kind of going to events, hearing like why they care about it was helpful for me, and that's why.
Yeah, I can go next. So very similar to Alexa, I didn't know I wanted to do finance until sophomore year. So when I first started college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I've always described myself as a jack of all trades, master of none. So when I was considering my career options, I was mainly like looking at like positions that I could gain a general skill set. So I started with consulting, just hoping to explore multiple industries. So I had a summer internship in consulting, but I didn't really like it. I liked the analytical part of consulting, but I just felt that it was kind of too fluffy. I wanted something that's more data driven and more tangible. So maybe finance would be a good fit for me. So after talking to people at the Career Center and just connecting with alumni, I figured maybe I should try for investment banking because that's like a field that really attract a lot of people with high caliber, and that would give me a very like general skill set in terms of financial modeling and just like people skills. So that's how I went into investment banking particularly.
So yeah, I guess my background is kind of similar to Alexa, especially because I came into the SFS freshman year mostly focusing on political activities, even through my extracurriculars. So like I had the high school campaign experiences, I had, student government experience. But sophomore year is really when I started to like think about what's the next step, what is the next step toward professionally career, what I want to do. So the natural goal for me was to be like thinking more toward the private sector and to think more about what my options are there. Went to the Career Center a few times, interact with peer advisors and with career counselors. And a huge part of it was just having those conversations, right? Having those conversations kind of guided me on the right path towards, hey, finance is a natural next step, and kind of connecting the dots. And I guess we'll talk about this a little later in the other questions, but that was the main step for me, was just realizing that is a natural next step. I didn't have that goal to begin with, but those conversations kind of enabled me to see it. So yeah, that's kind of how things started.
Awesome. Great. Thanks everyone. And yeah, Henry, no problem. Let's jump ahead to that, right? Like, so maybe starting with Henry, because you just mentioned it, what were some of like those light bulb moments for you that made you realize like finance is a good another next step, right? And what were the things that you drew upon beyond like your conversations with career counselors that help you like really solidify that interest in finance?
So yeah, it was interesting. I think I would point to last year this time. So really at the beginning, the kickoff of recruiting season, just going to the first few events and getting the chance to hear from people, talk to people, alumni, and analysts. A huge part of it was being present, right? Being at those events. I know it's happening virtually this year, but last year we got the chance to just speak with people in person and connect with people and realizing that for me, I was debating between like IB or sales and trading. For me, realizing and talking to me, and I felt the same way, like as I'm sure Alexa would say, like sales and trading being more connect made me feel lay out my experiences and connecting the dots was kind of the beginning of the momentum for the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Henry. Um, Alexa, I don't know if you want to add on to what Henry said or refer to even what you were mentioning earlier in terms of, yeah, realizing, that that you want to go to law school and perhaps like government working in the government later on, but knowing that this is like an experience that you currently want to have and just wondering like, what were some of the conversations or experiences that you had inside and outside the classroom that kind of solidified those plans for you?
Course. Yeah, I would say a couple things. One, so I started the finance recruiting process before I had taken like the first day of iFinance or something, but I ended up loving that class, like absolutely loving it. I love the professor. I loved all the connections that we were making, high level graphs. I like working with data as well. I like that kind of quantitative side of it. Partially why I'm an international economics major. All those things fit into like what I'll be doing. So that was kind of my academic experience with it. And then going through recruiting, I think it really is just talking to people and figuring out like why they went into it, where they went. I mean, I started with what the heck is finance? I asked all the people I knew above me, like that were still in my clubs, organizations, other just like upperclassmen from my classes at Georgetown was like, hey, so tell me about this process. Tell me about why you went into it, things like that. And that started kind of as the launch point for me. And then from there, asked them for other connections at different banks and figured out why they liked being there. And all those things kept adding up. And there was a point where I was realizing like, hey, I like this, but I don't want to do strict investment banking. Like I don't see that for myself, but I do really like the S&T side of things. I like, and I think like after working in government internships as well, it's super interesting, but something that frustrated me was kind of like a lack of efficiency sometimes. And so that's finance is kind of the opposite of like fast paced. You have to do everything at once. This efficiency is like the name of the markets, things like that. And so that's something that also attracted me to like that kind of work style was something I wanted. And in addition, going through with like my entire career trajectory, I think especially, I mean, like we can say looking at 2008, financial markets play a huge role in like the global economy, and they're not necessarily regulated as well as they should be. And I think in the future, when I want to go into that kind of policy or work or things like that, having an in-depth private sector understanding of how the markets work and what incentives there are for people who are in this industry will help in the future with kind of regulation and policy and things like that. So that's also a motivation for me.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Alexa. Um, and Sylvie, I know for you, you dabbled in consulting, right? And talking about like uh, being working at McKinsey and kind of just going through the steps and realizing ultimately it wasn't for you. When it came to exploring finance or whatnot, did you have any questions about like, will I be able to pivot successfully since I had an internship in consulting and I'm in the college, but now I want to try finance? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was deciding to do finance, I also debated if I should do sales and trading or IB because I'm an econ major, so it makes more sense for me to go into sales and trading. And I also had a lot of people saying things to me like, "Oh, you're not that quantitative, so maybe you shouldn't do IB." But no, that's not true. Um, you don't have to be super quantitative, or you don't have to know everything about finance or accounting to be able to land an offer in IB. So the kind of like the thought process that drove me into IB was I talked to different people in sales and trading and IB, and I feel like I really enjoyed talking to people in IB. Sorry about the sales and trading people, but I liked the aspect that you would know more about individual companies rather than just like the broader like macro stuff in general, and that interested me the most. And long-term wise, I don't see myself doing finance for too long, and maybe in the future I might like go back to school and get an MBA and maybe start my own business someday. So I think IB would be the best first job to have like out of graduation. So that's kind of like how I decided.
Awesome. I did not know that maybe you would want to start a business one day. That's great. I mean, entrepreneurship and so many others are always like really great exit opportunities from IB. And like same thing for S&T, right? There's so many other exit opportunities that you can take. And so always in that regard, I think the finance industry, it's always a pleasant surprise like how people can pivot their careers based on like what they've done in finance and what they're aiming to do in the future, for sure. So for the three of you, I was wondering, especially as you know, you all talked about how your realizations of IB versus S&T and you know all these other things. I'm wondering, in your conversations, did you feel scared that you know didn't have the traditional background of like a finance major or whatnot when you were approaching alums to talk to them or whatnot? Well, can you share a little bit about what that experience was like? Oh yeah, Henry, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can go first. I guess to be transparent, my stage of the process at this time was kind of starting the exploration. Like I only knew that this was something I probably wanted to try, but I wasn't like already doing the prep work behind the scenes. And if you already have, great. But just for anybody out there who's like exploring for the first time, just curious, that was me. So no need to be afraid. The process is starting, but there's a lot of work that can be done. For me, really, it was those first few background and enlightening piece to me, like how to connect that background, that coursework to the markets. And it turns out like the markets are shaped a lot by political and economic events around the world, by what the Federal Reserve is doing. And having that story and going through that and practicing that for the first time with people who understood that background was the most effective practice. Go through so many iterations of like interview practice and stuff like that. It begins with starting that conversation. So yes, of course, you know, it was a bit intimidating at first, especially I feel like I can say this, you know, with a bunch of MSB people that feel like, you know, they're more prepared. That's okay, guys. I mean, like, there's a lot of things that we can shine into. Like speaking to your strengths is a huge thing, and having those conversations.
I can go ahead and go next on that one. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I absolutely felt intimidated. I absolutely felt like, oh no, everyone else is coming from the business school. Everyone else knows everything about finance, and I only know a few things. But the reality is that's not true at all. Like everyone's still learning. We're all still students. And if you look at the specific job or internship postings and you look at the skills they're looking for, there might be like a familiarity with the markets or something like that, but you can get that from reading the Wall Street Journal. You can get that from being up on news, from being curious about it, from talking to people. The skills they're really looking for are able to deal with data, at least from the S&T perspective, able to communicate effectively, interested, hardworking, things like that, that you already have these skills for. You just have to show in your background kind of where they come from. And that could be from a class, that could be from an academic environment, that could be from a prior internship on a campaign. Like my example is I always use my campaign internship, which, you know, just sharing, I hated the environment of it, but I always show like that's communication skills. Yes, I'm reaching out to constituents saying like why my candidate is the best, you know, and that's translating into why I could reach a client and tell them why I think this investment is the best. And they're like, oh, exactly, those are transferable skills. So I absolutely felt like everyone in the MSB knew everything and I knew nothing, but going through the recruiting process, I realized that that is not true. And that is just kind of what it seems like, just a semblance. And then at least from the perspective of the internship, I had a mix of people who had done like economics, who had done a completely unrelated major, and people who were in the business school, finance majors from different schools. And they might have known one or two Excel formulas that I didn't. But other than that, it's all learning on the job. Especially sales and trading is much like an apprenticeship kind of thing. And you kind of learn on the job a lot, and especially it depends on by the desk, things like that. So I never felt behind when I actually like got into the internship. And I think as well, especially with these positions, they're looking for a variety of people. If you have a background in finance, awesome. They know you're interested. I'm sure you'll be great. But they're also looking for people who can look at things from a different perspective that might be able to add something that someone with a traditional financial training might not have looked at. For example, like during one of my interviews, they asked me for a stock pitch, and I talked about like a Brazilian oil company because I knew about Brazil and because I was thinking about it like that way that maybe someone else wouldn't have done. So that's something I would say. So absolutely yes, but do not think that you're behind at all. Like you can do this.
Great pep talk. Great pep talk. How about you, Sylvie? What did that experience look like for you?
Yeah, so actually for me, I didn't feel too like nervous about my background. It actually made me very confident because I knew there's something that can set me apart from other candidates, because most people in IB, they're coming from accounting and finance. And I know like once you get the interview, that means you're qualified for the job at least. And there's something that you can just highlight in terms of the skills, like quantitative problem solving and analytical, those can come from your internships and your like projects you did in school. It doesn't have to be like you know everything about accounting or finance. So like pretty much every interviewer asks me like, why did you choose econ and sociology? That's such an interesting combination. And I've had like interviewers asking me like, what do you think of capitalism from a sociology perspective? So there's more like things to talk about. And personally, I think the expectations for like a liberal arts background, a candidate with a liberal arts background is lower in terms of the technicals, and because they teach everything on the job. And as long as you can show a passion in finance, you've had some relevant work experience or just course experience, you'll be fine.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sylvie. That's such a great perspective that I will make a note to share with my students in the future. The fact that like, hey, maybe the fact is that like when I'm an economics and sociology major, just by my major alone, I am sticking out in a sea of like, you know, other students, right, with very similar looking resumes. I'm not going to lie, right? And yeah, I think that's so great that they engage with you and asked you like, what do you think about capitalism from a sociology standpoint? What a great question to be asked in an interview that's, you know, related to finance, but also relates to you and what you're studying. And that's fantastic. And one thing that Sylvie said that I really want to validate for not just everyone in this panel, but also everyone in like that's watching, if you get an interview, generally it means that they believe you can do the job. You know what I mean? Like if from your resume and cover letter, you've communicated that you have the characteristics and skill sets they're looking for, the interview is like a validation that they genuinely believe you probably can do the job. But now it's a test of like, will you fit in, right? Will you fit in with our firm culture? Will you fit in with our expectations and what we're looking for, right? But I hope that each and every single time one of you gets an interview, know that like, I hope it's like a good confidence boost that like employers believe you can do the job. Truly. I'm not just saying this as your advisor, but as like someone myself, right? That has gone through many different interviews to be able to like work even here at Georgetown or in other places. Like that's truly like some part of landing the interview, which is great. So all that being said, like never give up. So something that you all touched upon that I would love to talk a little bit more is like, how did you specifically answer that question of why are you interested in finance, right? And I know we talked a little bit, or rather we did talk about the experiences in academics and like, you know, for Henry and Alexa, like working in campaigns, right? Like the academic background that Sylvie had. And I'm just wondering, how did you guys compose your answer to that question, knowing that it would come up not just in interviews, but also when you were networking?
I can go ahead and start then. I guess of like, all right, so why finance? Because I think this is true. You can come from any background, but they are going to expect you to have a good answer to it. And one like iteration of an interview, I had someone look at my resume and say, you don't have anything on finance on here. Like, why do you want this job? Like, why do you want to be in this? And I think it really goes down to like the fundamental, like what you'll be doing on the job, both the things that like the work environment was something I talked about, but also the idea, and this kind of goes back to why I chose like a Brazilian oil company as my stock. It was like, all right, so what's happening in the Amazon and what like where the Brazilian government is with regulating the Amazon has to do with oil prices, which also has to do with like US companies that are producing that also are coming from Saudi Arabia, like all these different connections around the world and how that works into financial markets was something I kind of talked about. Like, I love this. I love taking different countries' perspectives and putting them together and figuring out how that relates to financial flows and what's going on in the economy. And then at the end of the day, like how that translates to the people in each of these countries and things like that. And people in Argentina who are able to now create a business selling soybeans and they can export those and that goes on a commodities market, you know, things like that. And so I kind of talked about how I really like those linkages. I really like looking at the top down kind of idea of that, and it fit really well into like my narrative for sales and trading on for fixed income specifically, because that's a lot of macro. And then I did talk about like personally, I talked about my siblings. I talked about the experience. Like I love being around other people. I love talking to people. I love those kind of experiences and want to be in that environment as well. And so it's both your, I think, like academic interest. And I was like, I know I'm interested in this. And I know I also want to be in a position where I look at other countries. Like I was really interested in everything. I like fixed income. I like domestically, things like that. But I knew like I wanted to probably be on like a foreign exchange or emerging markets kind of desk. And I also was very directed in that. I was like, I have this understanding and this background. I want to be able to put that to use because I think I have a unique perspective that could help you. You know, I've studied a lot of Latin America. I studied abroad in Latin America, like all these things that are now helping me go ahead and will be going into my full-time job. So I kind of communicated that. And like, for me was a little bit more specific of how I saw myself fitting in at the firm, but took both academic interests, my past experiences, whether or not they're relevant to finance, but the skills that I've learned from them, as well as just my personal preferences for what I wanted in a job.
Yeah, I can go next. I think with this question, the why finance question, there's 3 points that you really need to hit on, right? You need to show your strengths, you need to link your strengths to finance, and you need to show that you understand the job you're applying for. So whether it's sales and trading or investment banking. So strengths. At the time, I couldn't tell you so much about investment strategies, right? But I could tell you what's going on with trade between US and China, between US and Japan. I could tell you stuff about the EU and what's going on there, how they're handling COVID, right? And how that's affecting their bond market there, or what's going on with OPEC. I could speak to those things, and you can speak to those things really well. If you do it really well, they'll respect you for it. The next step is linking that to finance. Why does being interested? Well, I can link that to the financial markets. That's a pretty easy thing to say, right? And then you have to give an example of how you would do that, right? For a bond pitch or a stock pitch, and showing that you understand the job, right? Sales and trading, as Alexa and I have continuously alluded to, is a fast-paced environment. You know, you collaborate, you get stuff done. It's obviously you watch the markets closely. All these things tie in together. So you got to hit those points, and all throughout, show that you're a good communicator. And that's probably more doing than saying, right? In those answers, be very, very precise and be very prepared, and you'll get more prepared. Don't worry if you don't have a solid answer yet. Have those ideas, practice, meet people who have a similar background but are a little bit farther ahead than you in experience, and put it together. And if you really put your mind and put your heart into it, it will come together. It did for us.
Wow, Henry just gives such a good answer. So that's also like how I approached my answer to this question. I sort of just built on my past internship experiences. And like one advice I would give is to have a narrative in terms of why you wanted to do finance, why investment banking or sales and trading. For me, I just drew on my experience in consulting and what I liked and disliked, and what finance can fill the gap. Also like highlight your relevant experiences that can highlight the skills that they're looking for, either like analytical problem solving or teamwork skills. Also just show like a good attitude and a passion of learning new things.
Great answers, everyone. Honestly, definitely. I love that these are all things that you're mentioning, simply because I think they would be things that I would say too in advising, but to know that there's a level of credibility when it comes from you all having gone through successfully this kind of process, right? And so I guess I was just wondering for you all, especially because when you recruited, you were in many of our attendees' shoes as a sophomore. Was that daunting? And how did you kind of get over that initial awkward hump of starting those networking calls while you were recruiting?
I can start. I think Sylvia and Alexa, you guys are both seniors, right? So I guess I'm a little bit closer to the process last year. But last year, I just remember at first, I'm like, what is even going on, right? Like I was kind of like following a few friends to these events. But really the first thing that was super important was having those peer mentors. So maybe a peer a year older or 2 years older that could kind of speak directly. This is what happened last year. This is the step you need to take, right? Initially, it was kind of awkward to just, get a lot of business cards, send a lot of emails. But after a while, once you have those first few conversations over the phone and get kind of the vibe of like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Because at first it's like, what am I supposed to do? But once you get the hang of it, ask certain questions, take notes, develop relationships, it kind of comes naturally. And you want to make sure you're connecting with people at a variety of firms, and that you're connecting with people from a variety of backgrounds. But if there's someone with a similar background to you, go for it. Like, connect with them, try your best to connect with those people. Those people are the ones who understand your shoes the best, right? So that's what I would say.
Great. Thanks, Henry.
I think I would also say it's weird. It's not a normal thing. I feel like going through the course of college and high school to just reach out to these people you don't even know at all and ask them for like valuable time. But this is just how it goes. Like, know that this is just what you're expected to do. Everybody's doing it. No one on the other end is going to think it's weird or think you're asking for too much. Like, this is just how the process goes. Like, they're going to sit there and they're expecting to see emails from you saying, hey, I'm interested. I want to learn more about your job, because they know this is how it goes. And I think another big aspect of networking is the idea that in addition to looking at your qualifications academically and your past internship experience, things like that, you spend a lot of time with the people you're working with, just because the nature of like the way things are organized and the long hours in this industry, that they really want to know that they can sit by you 8, 10, 12 hours a day and like be able to get along with you as well. So that's just kind of a part of this like process that partially is responsible for the networking that happens, because at the end of the day, they want to add someone to their team that will get along with them and will do it. And there's so many different teams, so many different banks, that you will find something that fits for you. But just get over that of saying, you know what, everybody's doing this. I'm not doing anything weird. I'm not asking for too much. Like, this is just how it goes. And you should also like pat yourself on the back because you're being proactive. Like, they want to see you reaching out. This is what they want to see. They want to see a list of questions. They want to see that you looked into their background and said like, hi, like I see you went to Georgetown. You can look on Hawaii Gateway. I see you went to Georgetown. I see you studied X and you're now at X bank. Like, can we talk about this? I'm really interested. And then I think when you go into those calls, like Henry said, it'll get better with time. At first you're scared. At first, like, I don't know how this goes, but it gets easier and easier. And then you can kind of figure out like which people, sections of a banks do you vibe with more, which ones do you not, because there's a bank for everybody, but there's some that you certainly like might not see yourself fitting in as well, and that's fine, because at the end of the day you're going to end up at one. But it's important to like figure that out, because as much as it's them interviewing you, this is also something they always say, it's you interviewing them. Like, this is going to be a big part of your life. You need to find a like spot that's right for you. So also think of it that way. Think of like, I'm figuring out what I want, as well as them kind of seeing how I'm doing, whether or not I would be a good fit for the bank as well. And I think, like Henry said, like having a list of questions, writing down notes is super important. I had a document with like my list of questions, try to come up with some unique ones, like make sure you do ask about their job, things like that, but something that like you're really curious about when you think internally and reflect on like what you really want out of a job or internship. And then write notes on what they said, and then always send a follow-up email, always say thank you, always mention something specific that they talked about if possible. And then it's just the expectation that if you had a good conversation, you can ask them for someone else to connect you to, so you can kind of keep your network growing that way. But I think bottom line is like, you're doing the right thing. Like, be proud of yourself. It's not easy, but you'll get used to it and you'll get better at it, and this is what you're supposed to do, and that's how you be successful. It's just like a quirk of the industry.
Yeah, just to add on what Henry and Alexa just said, I think another point that really helps me was to try to broaden your network, not just like limited to the alumni working at the firm, but also like peers or any like upperclassmen that have just gone through this process. And know your audience. I know it sounds super cliche, but when you're talking to a peer, you can ask for more like tangible, more internship related questions. And because I remember when I was recruiting, I just couldn't get to the super day round, and I didn't know why. So I reached out to a lot of upperclassmen and had them mock interview me, and that was super, super helpful. They give me so many useful feedbacks, and I know that that wouldn't be possible with like full-time analysts or associates, because their time is so valuable. So definitely don't limit yourself to just alumni, and try to broaden your network. You can also reach out to people like from your high school, just anything. Just be genuine, express your interests, don't be afraid. Once you start networking, it will become very natural to you.
Wonderful, fantastic points, everyone. I could not have said it better myself and totally agree. To build off of Sylvie's point, actually, that she mentioned, right? Being able, and also to Henry's point, utilizing upperclassmen and like asking them questions and whatnot. I'm wondering what kinds of resources you all utilize throughout the process, right? Where did you go to study up for like technical interviews? You know, who did you reach out to when it came to like conducting perhaps some mock interviews or things like that?
Yeah, I can start. So for me, in terms of technicals, because investment banking is very technical savvy, so I basically just studied the 400 question guide, and so that's pretty much it. In terms of technicals, it's very straightforward. For um, like the behaviorals, asked my peers for help. I also visited the career center so many times. So that's like one thing. And also in terms of finding peers, I use Hoya Gateway. And other than that, I use LinkedIn mainly.
I think in utilizing other resources, like both Sylvie and Henry said, I went first with my, oh my gosh, what is finance? What do you do? Kind of questions to people who are in my clubs, who are upperclassmen, things like that I knew really well. And they helped me kind of reassure me, tell me more about it in a very casual environment so I could be prepared then to go have the bigger conversations with people who actually work at firms, things like that. So I did that, highly recommend it. Also went to the career center for kind of resume review, help, things like that. Just booked an appointment, was like, here, I have a question about this. What do I do? In terms of technical preparation, I had some vault guides to finance interviews I found online. I used those. I also used upperclassmen that I knew. I remember one time I'm on the mock trial team here, and a guy who was a senior at the time was in IB at Stiefel, completely different from me. But I was like, I'm so worried they're gonna ask me these questions. I don't know what to do. It was like 11:30 p.m. I was like, Eric, can you please just give me like an interview right now? I had one of my first rounds the next day, and he was like, absolutely. Took all the time, probably in the ICC till like 1 a.m. going over questions. But I think my point of that is saying that like we all, if you know, like we're happy to help. Other upperclassmen that have gone through this process are happy to help. We know what it's like. We know it's not easy, but that you can do it, and that it really does help to kind of talk it out with people and do it that way. So don't be afraid to ask other people going through it. Also, I ended up kind of forming a support group with two other girls that I was going through finance recruiting with that also were not in the MSB. So we would kind of help each other if we had a question about something, would do a practice interview. So even having that like someone else going through the process with you support network was really helpful for me. So maybe let's say I forgot there was an event happening one day, we text in the group chat and be like, oh, are you going to like the Barclays thing today? So that's something that was helpful. So if you know someone else, like you're not competing against anyone else really, like there's a position for everyone if you want it in this industry, especially for people at Georgetown. Like we're in a really good position, being honest. Like we're a target school for all these banks that are coming here, which is really, really lucky. So yeah, lean on other people also going through the process. And now, I don't know if Julie's going to talk about this, but getting into this platform that the Career Center has called Big Interview for a lot of these higher views and kind of virtual interviews, first round things like that. Because even going through it when it was in person, I still had higher views for some first round things. I don't think it's going to go away. Basically, it's a platform that gives you kind of the recording of yourself and gives questions, and you can go by industry. So there's finance industry questions, and they'll kind of give you feedback on how you answer them and be able to practice. So that's something that like I wish I had knew about and was able to use. So in practicing with it, just like advising people, it's been super helpful.
I totally agree with everything Alexa and Sylvie just said. I guess I can focus more on like interview specific for sales and trading interviews. They don't require a bunch of technicals, but there are a few things you should make sure you definitely know. Obviously, every day you want to be familiar with like the main rating, but make sure you're consistently following the news. And you might, but I didn't follow like financial news day by day. When I started this process, that's the first thing they told me, and that was an easy thing to do. Just making sure every day at Leo's in the morning, just reading the news, right? And interviews, they will ask you like big picture questions about what's going on in the markets. Have stories like that prepared. They'll ask you questions sometimes like brain teasers, like how many gas stations are in America or something like that, right? Like make sure you practice those. Everyone here is smart problem solvers. Just make sure you practice, and yeah, make sure you know things like numbers wise. You don't have to memorize a ton for sales and trading, but like main things, right? So yeah, that's the main advice I would give on that front. And really, it's practice, practice, practice.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I promise I did not tell them to shout out the Career Center, but I'm glad that the Career Center could be so helpful. And yes, to Alexa's point, we have Big Interview, a platform where you can use to practice virtual interviewing, which is super helpful. We also have a really great resume platform called Resume Worded. It will provide you with tailored feedback about things that you can add or subtract to your resume. It's very business heavy, so it's going to hammer you to like quantify your results and whatnot, which is always a good thing, especially for finance. So just keeping an eye on the time and wanting to leave some time for all of your questions. The last question that I want to pose to our wonderful panelists would be, what are some pieces of advice that you'd like to offer current sophomores about how to embark in this process? I know that you guys have been just dropping pearls of wisdom throughout the course of this hour, but if there's just one last thing you could tell them or encourage them with that you haven't been able to mention yet, now's your chance.
I can start. So this, not gonna lie, this can be a really stressful process. But be resilient, be calm. That first interview that you get, that first interview invite is a huge validation, because that first month, like I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, like I don't know if I'm doing, like frankly, but that first interview invite is a huge validation, and you'll feel it when you get that. But be natural, be yourself, right? As Alexa was saying, you don't want to be, you're interviewing the firm too, right? And you don't want to like kind of fake yourself and end up not being the right fit. If you're yourself and they don't accept you, then it wasn't meant to be. So be it. You can move on, right? There's a whole bunch of firms out there, and having those conversations with a variety of people is going to give you maximum options, right? So be natural, be yourself. It can be a stressful process, but a lot of people are going through it at the same time. You have upperclassmen resources, you have Career Center resources, you have wonderful alumni. They truly do want to help. The ones that volunteer their time. So really leverage your resources, and yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, I know this process seems so daunting because I've gone through this 2 years ago, and especially the peer pressure from like recruiting, just seeing how your friends got offers or interviews, but you've only been getting like rejections. Don't worry, you will eventually get there. So like one piece of advice that I would give is to reflect on your interview experience or just the conversation you've had with like the analysts or associates, and just try to think like why you didn't do well and what you did well. And I'm always there, like if you guys need any like interview prep or mock interviews, you can feel free to email me. Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo what both Sylvie and Henry said, and that I'm also here to help with anything. Believe in yourself because you got this. It is stressful. Like it will get stressful. There'll be points you'll feel overwhelmed, or at least I did. But at the same time, you'll get through it. Keep your head down. You got it. There's definitely a place for you, but you just have to figure it out and be really intentional about where you want to end up too. I would tempt you to don't look at like what your friends are doing, which banks your friends want to be in, which sections they want to be in, and think you have to too, because I think really reflecting on what you want, what kind of work environment, what kind of data or inputs do you want to work with? Do you want to, like Sylvie was saying, focus really in on one industry or on one kind of company for like 6 months at a time? Or do you want to know 20 million things about 20 million other things and have it be like goldfish? Like there's a bunch of different positions in between those two extremes. In this industry if you want to, and you'll find a place that's right for you. But just be really honest with yourself and what you want, and reflecting, and listen to what people say when you network with them about like what they like about their bank, what they like about their role, what they don't, and why they got into it. and kind of think of things you identify with and then go with it for that, like through that channel, I think is really helpful, or at least what helped me. But you can do this. You are not behind any MSB people, no matter how prepared they seem. And you'll all be great. Every Georgetown student has these foundations, has these skills, and is able to do it. You also have to just believe in yourself. Like, I think confidence goes a long way, even if you don't totally believe it all the time. If you're like, you know what, I want this, I deserve to be here, because you all do, and kind of relay that to interviewers, I think you'll do a really good job. And yeah, I'm absolutely happy to help with anything at any time. You got this, and I can't wait to see all these LinkedIn updates of where y'all will be, and then get coffee, maybe make a trade, who knows.
Excellent. Thank you all. And really good points. Yes, that I have to say, I think it's new to this generation, the updating LinkedIn with incoming analyst at such and such bank. It was not like that during my day, but which I know can both be celebratory, but also anxiety inducing. So for sure, but wonderful, wonderful points. Thank you all so much. Like, I think for everyone watching, like, these are three people that have made it on the other side, with their hopefulness and tact and just even confidence, right? I think, I don't know, I feel like for all three of you, you just exude a lot of, like, not just confidence, but self-awareness and this realization that, right, like, there are ups and downs, but getting through, like, you will get through it first and foremost. And two, you all believe, I think, really well that you have something to offer, which is true. You all definitely have something to offer, and that extends to everyone watching, right? And